Coming back to the game plan outline here for single raise pot in position flop c-bet, there's a couple of things that I want to take a closer look at in PO Solver to show how I came to, first of all, the simplifications for the in-position strategy, and also the folding thresholds or the simplifications for the out-of-position strategy. So starting with the in-position strategy, I'll pull up a few sims. So the first thing I'll look at is the paired board strategy. And you'll notice I had two categories, the low side card and the high side card. This also kind of overlaps with, how high the pair is in addition to the side card. But I didn't want to go into too much unnecessary detail when it comes to the categorization of boards. So the thing I'm looking at here is whether there's any simplification we can make to a strategy that at the moment is, pretty close to a range bet. So very often this is going to lead us to see if we can get rid of checking to simplify future streets for us. And the way that I would check that is to look at the response to the small bet across a couple of different board textures. Now, the first thing I'll notice is that on these high paired boards, the small raise that I offered is the predominant size and being used at a pretty high clip with some hands that I think a lot of players would miss. And I can switch through boards using this pair filter here to make it a little faster to see if this carries over perhaps when I change the side card. For example, here bringing a 8 on board, and we see a pretty similar response with close to 20% raise and low fold frequency. If I change the pair, again, using the filter here to make it a little faster, changing the pair to be slightly lower. We looked at queen, queen 3 the first time. And now here, dropping the rank has switched the sizing to the large size. So that's an interesting strategic adjustment to be aware of. These are things that I kind of came across as I was grouping the paired boards. But again, frequency being quite high, fold frequency coming even lower. And I'm scanning for, hands that I maybe am surprised by myself, or also hands that I don't expect my opponents to find with ease. These weaker queen highs, jack highs, these backdoor straight draws with no backdoor flush draw. I'm not sure if they're getting to the right overall number here. And these are going to be the main things that determine whether or not we want to stick with a high frequency flop c-bet. And you can see even here that the fact that I've gone down to 10-10 instead of queen-queen has made a big impact on the checking frequency. So I'm basically probing for information on whether or not I want to range bet this situation. My current inclination is yes, I do want to range bet these situations. The extra high card seems to be helping in that regard. And perhaps this is the right time also to compare it to some of the lower boards where my instinct is that range betting is going to be less attractive. So here, the c-bet frequency is lower, the check raise frequency is higher, but the hand classes are feeling a little more reasonable. Like looking at how the board is structured, I'm thinking, will my average opponent find the queen 5, queen 6 with a spade in their hand? I think yes. The jack 6 with a spade in their hand, I think yes. The 10-8, 10-9, 9-8 without a spade occasionally, again, I think yes. This just visually to me is an easier board texture to play the correct strategy. So I'm more inclined to follow the correct c-betting strategy. So on the low paired boards, I did not simplify. On the high paired boards, I did. Now, another area of interest was these two Broadway textures. And this was one where I indicated that the removal of checks was my preferred simplification. You can see in this sim that the overbet and the quarter pot bet are both being used extensively. And they're also being used in what looks like a very deliberate way. Like there's some very strong preferences in certain hand classes. So that makes me feel that they're both important to keep in the strategy. And again, it's something where I might look through the counter strategy to the small bet, figure out how well I think my opponents are going to play versus the small bet, even look through the check back strategy, although I'm not going to go through that right now while we're studying flop play, and look through variations of the 2 Broadway texture again, maybe putting an ace on board to see if that changes my opinion. And I do want to point out, yes, very, very often, I forgot the ace high texture specifically. Very often we see a full range bet when you put the ace on board. But what I'm doing at the same time, and I'm going to transition topics in a moment, but as I'm looking through this category for, big bet, small bet, I'm also kind of eyeballing the folding thresholds that I mentioned before. The important hand classes for my opponents to raise, of course, as a way of measuring whether or not I want to simplify my betting strategy. But I'm also watching what the weakest hands they might be folding are on these different textures to give me a sense of how to play against the bet size. So here, for example, looking at the overbet, it's important, I would say very important, to recognize the extreme difference in defensive strategy that we see against an overbet. Against the small bet, we were seeing queen high diamonds continuing, even 10 high diamonds, 9 high diamonds, like any 2 diamonds basically, with some exceptions. If I highlight diamonds, I can see where the line is, like 9 high diamonds being the line. And we're seeing with a single spade, for example, only folding from like double undercard. And even there, that's kind of where the line is. So very, very loose strategy against the small bet. Against the overbet, however, nut diamonds, pure folding the flop. Single spade, including hands like ace of spade, 9, pure folding the flop. And we're even seeing a pair of sevens, sometimes pair of 7 with a spade, also folding the flop. And gut shots, 10-8, and jack X even, just folding flop. So an extreme change here in strategy. You can even see that weak king X is indifferent. And it's quite important to study, if you're seeing these bet sizes in your game, it's quite important to study the folding thresholds in response. So I'll show you a slightly more systematic way to do that. If I just stick with this texture for now, what we can do is we can open the Range Explorer, click on Fold, and we can see visualized right here what types of hands are folding. So this makes it quite clear, at least where the mixed hands are. And if I move it over here, I can hover and see the individual combos on the right-hand side. So keeping the Range Explorer open is going to help me recognize where those thresholds are. So in this case, if I was marking a threshold facing bet 150, I would probably just call like strong bottom pair, weak middle pair the line for this texture. And that would make sense to me. There's of course some variation here. Certain gut shots are continuing, no open enders are folding, certain bottom pairs are continuing, certain middle pairs are folding. As you get exposure to more and more of these spots, I think you'll develop a bit of a sense for what qualities you're looking for in the hand. And again, I think that describing all of that in your game plan is just going to be more information than you can process on the fly. You're looking for something short, something concise, something you can recall while you're playing, and perhaps something you could write on a flashcard to study it in your off time. So coming back here to the game plan, these are the folding thresholds that I've written for facing flop c-bet on all the different categories of texture. So we did look a little bit at the paired boards. You can see for both of them, and I'm assuming, again, the bet size being 25% pot here, because that's the bet size I was running into a lot, and that's the bet size I studied against. So against that size, I've written, queen high mix and worse backdoors. On the high side card or the high paired board, looking at king high and overcard with backdoor flush draw. These are like the strongest category of hand that's folding sometimes. That's the message I'm trying to convey to myself when I'm looking at this spot. So on the ace high textures, we're looking at king high with overcard. So that's a note to myself that not every king high has to call. And I can use the overcard kicker as a not a randomizer, but like a differentiating factor here. And on the high, low, low boards, just going through the language a little bit, the double overcard, the weak backdoor, you get the sense of what I'm describing here, I think, at this point. And maybe we can look at one or two more examples where the strategy is a little more complicated. Now, this is a low, low, low texture. And in this category, I described the folding threshold as double overcard or combo backdoor. And again, this could be difficult to interpret depending on exactly what board I put together. So I don't want to diminish the importance of exposure to a variety of these situations when you are developing your game plan. I'm going through the process somewhat quickly on video here, simply because the method is more important than the results. But I'll show you a example here of how small changes in the board texture can make big changes in the game plan. So here there's no straights on board. There's a front door flush draw. So what qualifies as combo backdoor for folding or double overcard is not exactly the same depending on those variables. So of course here, if I was to look at the low spade continuing in ace high, so there's a couple of double overcard ace highs here, ace 10 and ace 9, and the ones that have double overcard are continuing even with the low spade, ace 10 with the low spade, ace 9 with the low spade. The one that have just a single overcard here are only continuing with the ace of spades. But this is, this would count on this board as a combo backdoor. You've got the 7, you've got the 6. So even though you don't have an overcard, you have connectivity with the primary straight draw on the board. And that's often going to make a difference when you're splitting hairs about whether or not your hand should continue or not, right? Like over here, you can see king 7 of diamonds is close. Ace 7 of diamonds, pure continue. Similarly, you're going to see that other stronger hands in absolute strength, like king 10 here with the 10 of spades, is not continuing, even though king 7 of diamonds is continuing. So there's a little bit of variation here, not an important detail in my opinion. And if you got this slightly wrong and continued the king 10 instead of the king 7, does it matter? No. So you're looking for the general qualities. You're looking for a rough understanding of how to quantify and also describe the types of hands that you're looking to continue here. And it's noteworthy that, not every pair is even being ranked as strongly as some of these double overcards or these combination backdoor hands. When you look at, the 7 deuce with no backdoor flush draw, or the pocket 4s, pocket 3s with no backdoor flush draw. Now, a small change that I've made to the texture here is that I've moved the cards closer to each other so that there's single card gut shots on board. And in addition to, the suits are the same here, but we've moved, one rank lower here. So there's going to be a higher proportion of double overcard hands in the range. But there's also going to be single card gut shots, which means a higher number of front door draws available in the range. So what is this going to change about our strategy against the same bet size? You're going to see more pairs folding up front. So you see a number of 3x hands are folding up front in this case. And you're going to see a large number of gut shots now making their way into the continuing range. Now, not every single gut shot is continuing against this 75% pot bet. So I would put into the folding thresholds for a board like this, weak gut shot, or gut shot plus, whatever makes sense to you. And that's going to mean, the really good gut shots, like the ones that are drawing to the nuts, are certainly going to stay in here. The ones that additionally have backdoor equity are certainly going to stay in here. But this great number of backdoor plus front door draws is going to push out some of the weaker overcard hands. And this isn't to say that you're substituting the gut shots, the overcards for the gut shots. in like an effort to reach minimum defense or something along those lines. It really just means that because of the texture of this board, the hands that have enough equity to continue have changed. The overcard hands have less equity now. So it's important to recognize that you need, even that much better of a double overcard, backdoor flush draw type of hand, the perfect king of spades jack or ace of spades 10, the only hands of those qualities that are still continuing, or maybe, king 10 of diamonds or ace 9 of diamonds. But this isn't because we've reached minimum defense through a 4x or 6x hand. It's because our opponent's range has changed. The amount of equity that hand class has is different. And we need to be adaptable to different bet sizes, to different board structures in our understanding of relative hand strength. So that's why I do think it's important, even within these categories, if you're finding some confusion about the details, just a little bit of exposure to these parts of the sim will help you hone in your understanding of where the folding threshold is. And after looking at a number of sims like this, I feel comfortable writing notes to myself in the game plan that are more simplified and just leave me the room to adjust on the fly to little details like this. Here's one more example of a board I think is somewhat hard to interpret. The monotone category is certainly leaving a lot of information up in the air. When I describe a board as monotone, I haven't additionally described any other features of the board. And again, this is somewhat intentional because monotone boards are very rare. And even more so, the nuances of different monotone boards will probably take years for you to see all the different variations on in your actual gameplay. So these are spots that I personally don't spend a lot of time on, and I'm comfortable oversimplifying. But of course, you will occasionally want to look at a monotone sim. You will occasionally want to understand how to read and react to these situations. So I would look only at the most common things. We're facing small bets primarily. Some players will small bet with range on these boards, so I might be willing to go after them a little bit more aggressively with raises or with floats. And I want to be very general. So when I highlight spade, just any single spade, they don't fold. A very easy rule of thumb for a small bet on a monotone board. Now, when I block out spades completely, I've got a more interesting set of hands to look at. So I can look through here for, the approximate type of hand that might be willing to raise without a spade. I could pretty quickly narrow that down on this board to straight draws and pairs. So that might be a rule of thumb that holds up. Maybe here's like the combo backdoor type of hand. So there might be some small exceptions, but majority speaking, we're looking at weak pairs, maybe a bit of a combination. Like this is kind of a combination wrap type of hand, but I'm not overly concerned with getting that right. I'm looking for high frequency. I'm looking for broad generalities. For light floats, like hands that might surprise me, that are floating without a spade to hit minimum defense, we're looking at, quality high cards, maybe with a backdoor straight draw. Pairs seem to be good enough to continue just across the board. So I don't see pairs folding against this small bet. And of course, actual straight draws are not folding either. So maybe I would spend a little bit of effort adding some variation to that monotone board. If we were to take away the straight draws, perhaps by looking at this board, well, we haven't completely taken them away, but we've made them harder to make. We're now seeing what looks like a little more speculative floating with high cards. Definitely double overcard with the backdoor is getting in there most of the time. And within the ace high category, we're seeing them reach a little bit lower with their kickers. But other than that, we're not seeing much in terms of single overcard hands. And one more we could look at is when it's a high card board. Therefore, we have a harder time finding the overcard hand strength. So what might hand strengths look like if we go to just trying to avoid having too many straight draws in the range? Of course, a small limitation of my flop subset here. Here we're looking at Queen Jack X, so ace high is going to have less equity. We're not seeing much in the way of speculative ace high anymore, although we are still seeing that wheel wrap showing some aggression. But we're really looking for interaction with the high cards. It looks like ace 9, ace 8 are the qualifying high card hands, and that's about it. Like everything else is a draw. The 2 undercards are out. So we're really just looking at pairs, front door straight draws, quality overcards. And again, this is all within the no spade category. So that's like a pretty comfortable overview in my mind of how to play this spot, to the point where it's so rare that that's the maximum amount of time I'm willing to devote to it, and I want to move on to a different category. So hopefully that helps you get a sense for like the right amount of effort to put into these low frequency, low priority situations. It's not that you want to shut them out completely. It's just that you want to learn only the very basics of the spot and not get caught in that rabbit hole of figuring out every little nuance for these very rare situations.